By the time the court clerk mispronounced my last name for the third time and the baby sneezed like a squeaky toy in a church pew, I realized our small-town courthouse was built less for justice and more for community theater. The fluorescent lights hummed like an anxious hive, the flag sagged like it had seen too much. And I stood there with a diaper bag I did not buy for a child I did not make, rehearsing the line my therapist said would keep me out of jail. "Breathe, John." I breathed. The breathing did not help. Emily, my not-quite ex-wife yet, sat on the opposite bench, wrapped in a cardigan you could market as cozy regret. She had the baby bundled against her shoulder like a fragile apology. We were the kind of American tragedy people gossip about at Costco while comparing rotisserie chickens. Simple, portable, and somehow always under $5. The judge peered over his glasses with the expression of a man who had seen every flavor of betrayal, from quiet infidelity to banging on the hood at midnight cheating, and none of it surprised him. I held the lab report like a sacred scroll. DNA doesn't do poetry, it does math with a sledgehammer. Probability of paternity, 0.00%, which is science's delicate way of saying, "Buddy, you are a scenic detour in this origin story." I didn't need a statistic to tell me, but the number hit like a brick through a stained glass window. Somewhere in the back, my mother whispered a very Baptist, the universal punctuation for, I told you she was all lipstick and lies, and the baby hiccuped a rhythm that synchronized unhelpfully with my pulse. They asked if I wanted to hold the child one last time, as if I were at a closing time carnival booth where the prize had teeth and a birth certificate. My hands knew better than my heart. They stayed in my pockets like two guilty witnesses. I was not a monster, just a man trying not to drown in a sea of pastel swaddles. Revenge tasted sweet and chalky in the back of my throat, like a Flintstones vitamin you're too old to take but chew anyway. I pictured a speech, something Hollywood, me testifying about toxic love and the slow acid drip of betrayal that eats holes in a family Sunday routine. But real life in Indiana doesn't deliver monologues. It hands you forms. The judge stamped something. The clerk handed me something else. The bailiff said, "Good luck," which felt less like comfort and more like a warning label. Outside, the parking lot was August hot, the kind of heat that makes the air look tired. The HOA president, who has the energy of a middle school principal and the soul of a parking citation, hovered near the hedges, pretending to water begonias and absolutely recording a mental minute-by-minute for next door. I half expected her to serve me a notice. Your marriage is non-compliant with neighborhood standards. To my left, the church bell of St. Jude's, patron saint of lost causes, noted, chimed noon. To my right, the American flag snapped like a drumline. I walked down the steps and felt strangely weightless, like the moment after a roller coaster drops when your stomach is still in line buying kettle corn. The joke, I decided, would be mine. If I couldn't get my years back, I could at least get my punchlines right. If my life was going to be a parody, I would be the narrator. So here it is. America. The day I was legally freed from someone else's baby, I bought a lawn chair. I set it on my porch like a throne and watched the street as if it were a drive-in movie. I called the cable company to cancel the family package, kept the baseball channel, and told the lady on the phone that family is a word that occasionally bites. She said she was sorry. I told her it wasn't her fault unless she personally invented Instagram. That night, the sky turned the color of a bruise healing, and I made a promise in the glow of my bug zapper. No more chasing ghosts. No more being the straight man in someone else's farce. Let the conspiracy theorists in the neighborhood book club whisper that the baby was a government plant or a lizard prince from the deep state of daycare. I was done. Infidelity had come into my house like a raccoon in the pantry, noisy, shameless, and weirdly dexterous. I would clean up, change the locks, teach my heart how to make coffee. The credits should roll here, but America loves the prequel even more than the sequel. So rewind with me, 2 months and change, to when my wife evaporated like mist off a cul-de-sac at sunrise and the universe handed me a script I never auditioned for. The day after Emily reappeared with a baby like a plot device strapped to her chest, I hired a private investigator because Google is good for locating lost crockpot manuals, but not your missing wife's summer chapter. Rita Parrish introduced herself with a handshake like a seatbelt and a business card that smelled faintly of gasoline. She worked out of a strip mall between a vape shop and a tax service that only opened from January to April, and for emergencies. Emergencies was handwritten, which I found intimate and alarming. "Tell me everything," she said, and I did, from the soft focus wedding photo on our mantel to the hard-edged silence of the garage when her SUV didn't come home. Rita took notes on a yellow legal pad the way surgeons operate, confidently, efficiently, with a built-in skepticism toward optimism. Within 48 hours, she had more than the police gathered in 2 months of "we're doing everything we can" emails. Receipts, security footage, a hotel ledger from a town called Mercy Lake where the weekend fairs involve, officially, I might add, a butter sculpture competition and a gospel choir barbecue throwdown. "She was there," Rita said, tapping a timestamp that matched the afternoon the kids' school called to ask if Mommy is okay. The footage, Emily, hair tucked into a ball cap that wasn't hers, carrying a tote bag I recognized, and a laughter I didn't. Beside her, a man whose bio you could guess without a subscription. 6 feet of former high school quarterback, 3 divorces, 1 motivational podcast with Alpha in the title, a gold chain that believed in itself. Caleb was his name, and he ran something called the Mercy Lake Wellness Ranch, which is exactly what it sounds like if you remove wellness and ranch. They offered cold plunges, breath work, mindset restructuring, and a cryptocurrency for loyal clients called Diaper Coin, which turns out to be an unfortunate foreshadowing. Emily checked into a cabin named Serenity. She paid cash. Rita had pictures. Emily outside by the fire pits at dusk, writing in a leather journal. Emily at dawn, marching in a circle, while Caleb shouted about shedding shame, as if it were a Costco raincoat. Emily in the gift shop, buying incense that smelled like aspirational sadness. I stared at the images with the hollow disbelief of a man seeing his house from the sky after a tornado. Familiar outline, roof gone. Rita kept her voice level as a spirit level. "Look," she said, "people slide into places that promise to edit their lives. Most of the time, the only thing that gets edited is the credit card limit." Then she slid a printout across the table, a provisional birth certificate issued by Mercy Lake General, the father's line blank, the mother listed as Emily Ward. Our last name is Miller. My stomach did that elevator thing movies get wrong and gravity gets right. "There's more," Rita said, and showed me a photo snapped by some teen with a drone. Caleb and Emily, too close under a string of Edison bulbs that made even bad decisions look vintage. His hand on her lower back like possession, her smile like fresh paint over rot. Toxic love, the kind that markets itself as healing until the invoice arrives and your heart is the tip. "He's got priors," Rita added. "Fraud, a possession charge from his 20s, and a tradition of leaving town when the vibe turns litigious." I asked the question men ask when the ground falls away. Why? Rita shrugged without cruelty. Because she wanted to feel like the main character, and he offered her a script with lighting. Because some people go looking for a new story instead of new honesty. Because cheating isn't about replacement, it's about rehearsal. They practice a different self with someone who claps on cue. I drove home on county roads that stitched through fields and thought about all the crappy metaphors people feed you when your life breaks. Doors closing and windows opening, lemons into lemonade, blessings in disguise. But the only one that felt honest was this. When the Titanic sank, the band kept playing, because that's what they knew how to do. We kept going because the kids' lunchboxes still had to be packed, and I still had a job installing HVAC systems for people who want summer to feel like spring. The next morning, I put on my last good shirt and followed Rita to Mercy Lake. The ranch looked like a Pinterest board eloped with a used car lot. Twinkle lights, pallets repurposed as inspiration, burlap as a lifestyle. A woman at the desk welcomed us to our healing journey and asked if we were ready to realign our inner thermostats. I told her I install actual thermostats and mine works fine. Caleb appeared in linen like a walking apology to sleeves. His smile said he'd named a smoothie after himself. He looked right past me, the way a magician looks past the husband in the front row who knows where the dove came from, and told Rita there was no Emily here. Rita handed him a paper that proved otherwise. He stopped smiling with the efficiency of a garage door. We didn't find Emily that day. She'd already moved on to a motel by the highway where the ice machine screamed like a crime. But we left with something valuable. Confirmation that I was not crazy. I was just the only one in the room not selling tickets to the circus. 2 days later, my doorbell rang. Emily stood there holding a baby and said, "We need to talk." America, that's the kind of sentence you don't hear unless your life is about to go gluten-free against your will. She came back on a Wednesday, the spiritual middle child of the week, with eyes that looked like she'd been crying in rest-stop bathrooms and a baby that smelled like talc and destiny. The kids were at school, which was merciful. My mother was not, which was not. Emily stepped into the foyer and the house did a tiny shiver, like a dog remembering thunder. "Whose?" I asked. Not cruel, just surgical. She kissed the baby's head like an answer and didn't answer. In the kitchen, sunlight hit the table where we used to dump mail and promises. She set the carrier down, and the baby blinked at me as if I were a game show prize. "Here's what you could have won, John, behind door number what on earth?" "It's complicated," she said, which is American for, "I'm about to hand you a story with missing scenes, and you are going to become the director against your will." She talked, not linear, not clean, about Mercy Lake and clarity and shame detox, about Caleb's charisma, which she described like it was a legal substance, about wanting to step outside the map we drew in our 20s so she could see if there was a brighter town nearby. About the night she realized she was pregnant, and how tiny and huge that felt at the same time, the way fireworks feel to a deer. She said the words toxic love as if she'd only recently learned they don't mean intense. Had she said, "I made mistakes," with the same tone you use when you bump someone's grocery cart. She said family like it was a doorbell, pressed too many times, stuck on a house with no owner. My mother, who had materialized with a casserole by Act 2, as is her way, stood with crossed arms and a gaze that could turn sin into steam. "We do truth here," she announced to no one and everyone. And I remembered Thanksgiving when Emily brought a quinoa salad and the cousins treated it like a prank. The neighbors pretended to ignore the commotion, which meant they absolutely didn't. Mrs. Chandler jogged past our bay window 3 times in 10 minutes. Which is physically impossible unless your curiosity has cardio. Next door lit up with a thread titled "Strange Crying Sound, Coyotes," featuring a blurry photo of my front step and 114 comments, 92% of which were about unrelated raccoon sightings. I asked again, "Whose?" Emily looked at me, and for a second I saw the girl I married, the one who could beat anyone at Mario Kart and talk a cop down from a ticket with pure sincerity. Then she looked at the baby. Something in her face softened into a mother I didn't know. "It's not yours," she said. And it wasn't an apology. It was the final page of a book, slammed closed. The next part was logistics and armor. Do you want water? Do you need money? Where are you staying? Are you safe? Are we safe? I heard myself offering things my heart could not afford and my pride wanted to repossess. She said she'd sleep at her sister's, though her sister is a rumor with a mailbox. I told her we'd do a DNA test not because I needed proof, but because a town requires paper more than it requires truth. We did the swab like two actors in a public service announcement. The baby grabbed my finger with her starfish hand, and my ribcage did that ancient thing it does when a tiny human reminds you you're not only a man, you're a mammal. The evening was a committee meeting of ghosts. I looked at the photographs on the wall, and they rearranged themselves. The Disney trip, the Little League trophy, the anniversary at the steakhouse with the waiter who shouted, "Lovebirds!" You can't actually hear the sound of a memory unsaving, but if you could, it would be the click a seatbelt makes right before a crash. The results came fast, certified by a lab that sells certainty and branded pens. I read them at the table where our son learned long division, not the father. We do not teach children that phrase in school, but we should, the way we teach them to stop, drop, and roll. Emily cried in little bursts like a faucet that won't fully shut off. She said Caleb was gone, that he always had trouble with goodbyes, which is one way to describe skipping town ahead of a subpoena. She said she wanted to come home, a sentence that tried to dress itself in nostalgia and got stuck in the shirt. I looked at the baby, then at the front door. The door was honest. I opened it. The air smelled like cut grass and judgment. She left with the baby and a pink duffel I remembered from spring break 2009. The neighbors pretended to prune things that did not need pruning. That night, alone except for the hum of the refrigerator and the television laughter leaking through the wall from the Chandler's reruns, I wrote a list titled, "What Survives? Coffee." My son's glove broken in soft as a secret. My daughter's crooked tooth. My mother's stubborn prayers. The thermostat clicking exactly when it should. Me somehow. Revenge was a word I put on the list and then scratched off. Betrayal stayed. So did family, underlined twice with an asterisk. Sometimes a family is you and the people who don't ask for a receipt. In the morning, I called a lawyer whose billboard smile stretches above I-69 like a benevolent billboard sun. We started the paperwork. That's when the courthouse story happened, and the lawn chair, and the promise. Which brings us to before the beginning, the part we forget to tell because it doesn't have fireworks, just views. There were signs if you like to collect fossils of doom. Emily started calling the gym her studio, which is like calling a blender your culinary lab. She wore athleisure like a profession and learned specialty terms, macros, mindfulness, micro-cheats. Sunday nights, she watched videos of women preaching alignment while unboxing expensive candles. We were still good at the everyday. Garbage day, gas in the minivan, PTA auctions where I built shelves for the silent portion and she flirted with the loud. But you can be excellent at errands and starving in the cathedral. At first, I chalked it up to the season. People molt in the spring, shedding sweaters and sometimes promises. She bought a journal, the color of expensive luggage, and filled it with sentences that avoided verbs. We argued about little things that were big things dressed in thrift store clothes, how the dishwasher should be loaded, whether the kids could have TikTok, whether my work boots near the door constituted a blockage to energy. She installed a salt lamp on her nightstand. I installed a dimmer switch in the dining room because you can't argue with ambiance. Then there was church. We used to sit third pew from the back, a distance for the faithful skeptical. She drifted toward the front like a moth to spotlight. She joined a women's circle called The Nest, which sounded like a place where birds share worms, but was actually a Facebook group where women posted quotes in script fonts about choosing themselves, often over pictures of oceans that have never seen our county. The Nest hosted a retreat in Mercy Lake, and I, being a husband who trusts until the ground gives out, said, "Go, have fun, send me photos of the butter sculptures." She hugged me for a long time like she was stepping off a ship, and I was the dock. The kids made her cards involving glitter and unrealistic depictions of cats. Then she left. The first night without her was a novel inconvenience. By the third, I understood the bowl-in-the-sink loneliness of smelling her shampoo on a towel and feeling like you broke a museum rule. She texted at odd hours. Learning so much. Finding my center. Tell the kids Mommy misses their faces. I sent photos of homework, a lopsided pancake shaped like America, the dog sitting in her spot like the world's saddest stagehand. Her replies came slower, then stopped entirely. The call from the school came on day 9, a cheerful check-in that felt like a wellness check on my sanity. The police officer was kind and practiced. Had I tried calling her friends, her parents, the Nest admin, whose name was Peach, and whose profile picture was a succulent with bangs? We filed a report and watched our neighborhood become a search grid of walkers with opinions. Men from church helped. They wore hats that said things like, "Property of USA," and I loved them for it. The HOA organized a candlelight vigil that somehow included a bake sale. We lit the cul-de-sac like a runway no one landed on. People brought casseroles as if grief runs on lasagna. 2 weeks, then 3. The doorbell rang, and it was Pastor Wade with a look I associate with emergency rooms and weather alerts. He prayed in the foyer while I stared at Emily's shoes, lined by the mat like obedient soldiers waiting for orders. When I slept, I dreamed of rivers. In one dream, the river was made of receipts. In another, the river spoke with her voice and said, "Go back." On day 26, I drove to Mercy Lake with my brother, who is the sort of man you want in a crisis because he brings jumper cables to weddings. We found the wellness ranch and a receptionist who smiled precisely as wide as her job required. I learned the texture of a lie, slick on the surface, coarse underneath. We combed through cabins named Serenity and Renewal and, God help us, Mojo. We did not find my wife. What we found was a necklace I'd given her on a Christmas that still smelled like pine when I remember it. It lay under a folding chair, glinting like a coin at the bottom of a fountain no one cleans. I put it in my pocket like a last rite. If this were a serious story, this is where I'd tell you the exact moment the marriage died. But this is parody disguised as testimony, and real life doesn't give you a clean death certificate. It gives you a smear of lipstick on a coffee cup that isn't yours. It gives you a husband in an HVAC van rehearsing speeches to his reflection in the rearview mirror. It gives you a woman learning how to leave one room before she has the courage to walk into another. It gives you a town that says, "Bless your heart," like a spell, and means it like a bandage. It gives you silence that grows moss. Then it gives you a Wednesday and a doorbell and a baby. And later a judge, a stamp, and a porch chair throne where a man watches Twilight and thinks, "Okay, if there's a conspiracy here, it's that my heart keeps beating." People ask if I'd do anything differently. Sure, I'd learn sooner that family is not a contract. It's a campfire you tend or wander from. I'd spot the con when a guru demands a deposit and a devotion song. I'd teach my kids that infidelity isn't proof you weren't enough. It's proof someone else thought they could edit themselves without reading the instructions. Mostly, I'd remember that revenge is a chew toy for the hurt dog in your chest, satisfying for a minute, rubber in your teeth for days. The dog eventually drops it when you say, "Walk?" So I walk, past the mailbox where the HOA leaves its threats dressed as updates, past St. Jude's where lost causes keep getting found anyway, past Mrs. Chandler's house where reruns laugh on cue, and I walk home again where the thermostat clicks, the coffee maker hums, and my son's glove waits by the door. That sound? That's a heart learning a new joke, and this time I'm the one telling it.